The room went dead silent. Corinne Hale, 28 years old, sat at the end of the long table in the banquet hall outside Dayton, Ohio, watching her entire family freeze. She'd spent most of her life being invisible to these people. The forgotten daughter. The one they whispered about at holidays. The disappointment who worked night shifts at a place they called that sad nursing home. For years, she'd smiled when required and spoke when spoken to, sitting through family events where her name was carefully avoided in every conversation about success. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Her brother Marcus had just announced his engagement. The room had erupted in applause and champagne toasts. Corinne had kept her hands folded in her lap, the way she always did. She'd learned long ago that participating only reminded everyone she existed, and existing reminded them she'd failed. But then the bride-to-be leaned forward. Lila was beautiful in that effortless way that made everyone pay attention. Dark hair, kind eyes, the type of woman who fit perfectly into this family of polished smiles and expensive clothes. She'd been staring at Corinne for the past 10 minutes, her expression growing more confused, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "You're the one," Lila asked. 2 words. That's all it took. Forks stopped midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. Corinne's mother, who'd been laughing with her sister about vacation homes, went pale. Marcus looked between his fiancée and his sister, clearly lost. "I'm sorry," Corinne's aunt said, forcing a smile. "The one what?" Lila wasn't looking at anyone else. Her eyes were locked on Corinne. "The woman who saved my father's nursing home. The one who fought the corporation trying to shut it down. The one who protected his pension and kept hundreds of seniors from being forced onto the streets." She paused, and the silence stretched so tight it felt like glass about to shatter. Her name was Corinne Hale. The blood drained from every face at that table. Corinne's mother made a small choking sound. Her brother's mouth fell open. Her cousin Bryce, who'd spent the past hour bragging about his real estate deals, looked like he'd been slapped. "That can't be right," Corinne's mother said, her voice thin and shaky. "Our Corinne works at a care home, yes, but she does night shifts. Cleaning and things." "Cleaning?" Lila repeated, and something sharp entered her voice. "Dad told me everything." She built a legal case from nothing. Taught herself elder law. Found evidence of fraud that professional lawyers missed. She stood up in court against a team of corporate attorneys and won. Her voice rose. She started a nonprofit that's helped 14 other facilities. Saved over 300 people from losing everything. No one spoke. Corinne could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. The confusion. The disbelief. The slow, creeping realization that maybe they'd been wrong. But what made her chest tighten wasn't the shock on their faces. It was the way they looked at her now, like she was a stranger. Like she'd been hiding something from them. She hadn't hidden anything. They'd never asked. Marcus cleared his throat. "Corinne, is this true?" Before she could answer, her mother jumped in. "This must be a misunderstanding. There must be another Corinne Hale. It's not an uncommon name." "Mom," Corinne said quietly. Just one word, but it cut through the noise. Her mother stopped. Lila was still staring. "My father talks about you constantly. He says you're the reason he's still alive. The reason any of them are." Her eyes were shining now, emotion breaking through. "I've wanted to meet you for months. To thank you. And you've been here the whole time." Corinne felt something crack open inside her chest. All those family gatherings where they'd talked around her. All those holidays where her mother changed the subject when relatives asked what Corinne was doing with her life. All those birthday parties where Marcus got toasts and speeches while Corinne got a card signed by everyone in the same handwriting. They hadn't known because they'd never cared to know. Her aunt found her voice first. "Well, why didn't you tell us? If you were doing all this important work, why keep it a secret?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Corinne looked at her aunt. At her mother. At Marcus. At all of them sitting there in their designer clothes and expensive jewelry, looking at her like she'd committed some kind of betrayal by not sharing her life with people who'd spent years making it clear she didn't matter. "I didn't keep it a secret," Corinne said. Her voice was steady, but quiet. You never asked. Her mother flinched like she'd been struck. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But we knew you worked at Meadowbrook. We just thought. You thought I was nothing, Corinne finished. A failure. The daughter who dropped out of college and ended up cleaning bedpans. That's not fair, her mother said, but her voice had no strength behind it. Isn't it? Corinne met her eyes. When's the last time you asked me about my work? When's the last time anyone at this table asked me about my life? Silence. Lila looked around at the family, and Corinne could see the pieces clicking into place for her too. The way they'd treated Corinne all night. The seat at the end of the table. The conversations that flowed around her like water around a stone. Oh my God, Lila whispered. You didn't know. None of you knew. Corinne's mother tried again. We knew she worked in healthcare. We just didn't realize the scope. You told people I was a janitor, Corinne said. Not angry. Just factual. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Aunt Diane asked what I did, and you said I worked maintenance at a care facility. Her mother's face crumpled. The table had gone from celebration to crime scene in less than 5 minutes. Dessert plates sat abandoned. Champagne went flat in crystal glasses. And everyone was looking at Corinne like they were seeing her for the first time. Or maybe they were just finally seeing her at all. Subscribe now because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about family. Drop a comment if you've ever been the invisible one. You're not alone. Marcus pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loud against the floor. I need to understand this. Corinne, can we talk? Outside. But before Corinne could answer, her mother stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. Everybody just calm down. This is Marcus and Lila's engagement party. We can discuss all of this later. Later. Lila's voice cut through, sharp as glass. Mrs. Hale, your daughter is a hero. She saved my father's life. And you didn't even know. The words hit like a physical blow. Corinne watched her mother's face cycle through emotions too fast to name. Shame. Anger. Defensiveness. Grief. We had a difficult few years, her mother said, her voice breaking. After the divorce, everything fell apart. I was struggling. I couldn't. I wasn't. She trailed off because there was no way to finish that sentence that didn't sound exactly like what it was. An excuse. A reason, maybe, but not a justification. Corinne stood up. Every eye followed her. I need some air, she said. She walked toward the door, and the sound of her footsteps was the only noise in the entire hall. Behind her, she could hear her mother crying. Marcus saying her name. Lila's soft voice asking her father something Corinne couldn't quite hear. She pushed through the door into the cool October night, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. The parking lot stretched out before her, cars lined up like dominoes. String lights hung between lamp posts, swaying gently in the breeze. She'd imagined this moment before. The moment they finally knew. In her imagination, it had felt like victory. Like vindication. Like proof that she mattered. But standing there in the darkness, alone, she realized something that made her throat tight. She didn't need them to know. She'd stopped needing their approval 3 years ago, sitting in that courtroom, fighting for people who actually saw her. The door opened behind her. Corinne. She turned, expecting Marcus. Or her mother. Or maybe Lila, wanting to thank her properly. But it was her father. The man who'd walked out when she was 16 and started a whole new family like the first one had been a rough draft. The man who'd missed her graduation, her birthdays, every moment that mattered. He stood there in his expensive suit, his new wife's perfume still clinging to his jacket, and he looked at his daughter like he was seeing a ghost. I had no idea, he said. Corinne felt something cold settle in her stomach. About tonight? Or about the last 12 years? He flinched. Both, I suppose. They stood there in the parking lot, father and daughter, with nothing but years of silence between them. Inside, she could hear raised voices. Her mother. Her brother. The sound of family breaking apart at the seams. You want to know what happened? Corinne asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You want to know how I went from your disappointing daughter to someone worth noticing? Her father opened his mouth, but she kept talking. Let me tell you about the night it all started. About the moment I stopped being invisible and started being someone even I didn't recognize. Corinne had been invisible long before that engagement party. She'd become a ghost at 16, the summer her parents' marriage finally collapsed in a mess of lawyers and screaming matches that echoed through their Dayton house. Her mother had called her father names that made Corinne's stomach hurt. Her father had moved his things out over 3 weekends, each time taking a little more of himself with him until nothing remained but empty spaces. Marcus had been 23 then, already graduated and working at a marketing firm downtown. He'd escaped the worst of it by virtue of timing and distance. But Corinne had been trapped right in the middle, a bargaining chip neither parent really wanted to win. Her mother got bitter fast. Started focusing on appearances, on what the neighbors thought, on making sure everyone knew the divorce wasn't her fault. Remarried within a year to a man who owned 3 dry cleaning businesses and took her to Florida twice a year. Her father remarried faster. 6 months after the divorce was final, he was already dating Vanessa, a paralegal from his office who was only 10 years older than Marcus. Within a year, they had a baby girl named Hope. By the time Corinne was 18, her father had a whole new family and a whole new house, and she was the awkward reminder of his old life. Holidays became negotiations. Summers became obligations. And slowly, quietly, Corinne learned to take up less space, speak less often, need less attention. Being invisible hurt less than being a burden. Marcus had always been different. The golden child. The one who made everyone proud. He got into business school. Landed the good job. Bought the nice condo downtown. At family gatherings, conversations orbited around him like he was the sun. What's Marcus doing? How's Marcus's career? Did you hear about Marcus's promotion? And Corinne? She was the footnote. The afterthought. The one who went to community college because that's all they could afford after the divorce ate through their savings. Community college isn't bad, her mother had said, but her voice had been thin with disappointment. Lots of people start there. What she meant was, I expected more from you. Corinne tried. She really did. She studied business administration, pulled good grades, worked part-time at a coffee shop to help with expenses. She didn't complain when Marcus got money for a car while she took the bus. She didn't say anything when her mother skipped her academic awards ceremony because it conflicted with Marcus's work dinner. She just got smaller and quieter until she practically disappeared. Then she met Trevor. He was everything her family might have finally approved of. Tall, confident, studying business at the state university. He had plans. Big ones. He talked about startups and investments and changing the world, and when he looked at Corinne, she felt like maybe she mattered after all. They dated for 2 years. He'd drive down from campus on weekends, take her to dinners she couldn't afford, talk about their future like it was something real and solid. He told her she was smart, creative, the kind of partner who could help him build something amazing. I'm starting a consulting business, he'd said one night over cheap wine in his dorm room. Small businesses, helping them with digital marketing. But I need capital. Just enough to get started. Corinne had saved $12,000. 2 years of coffee shop shifts, birthday money, every spare dollar tucked away. It was supposed to be for finishing her degree, maybe studying abroad for a semester. This is our future, Trevor had said, holding her hands. Invest in us. Once the business takes off, you'll never have to worry about money again. She gave him everything. He was gone 3 days later. Phone disconnected. Social media deleted. His roommate said he'd moved out in the middle of the night. The business name he'd registered? Fake. The consultations he'd done? None. The future he'd promised? Smoke. Corinne sat in her apartment for 2 days straight, staring at her empty bank account, feeling something inside her crack apart. She couldn't tell her family. Couldn't face her mother's disappointment or Marcus's pity. Couldn't admit she'd been stupid enough to trust someone who saw her savings as opportunity and her love as leverage. She dropped out of community college the following week. Couldn't afford tuition anymore. Couldn't face the campus where Trevor had smiled at her and lied so easily. She told her mother she needed a break to figure things out, which was close enough to the truth. A break, her mother had repeated, her voice flat. Corinne, you're 22 years old. You can't just take a break from your life. But she could. And she did. She stopped answering calls. Stopped going to family dinners. Got a job through a temp agency that didn't ask questions. Night shift at Meadowbrook Care Home. Minimum wage plus $1 for working overnight. The kind of job nobody wanted and everybody looked down on. Her first night, the supervisor handed her a mop and a list of rooms. Bathrooms, hallways, common areas. Sometimes the residents need help getting to bed or finding their way back from the bathroom. Just be patient with them. Corinne pushed that mop down empty hallways at 2 a.m, listening to the sounds of people sleeping, and felt a strange sense of relief. Nobody here knew about Trevor. Nobody here expected anything from her. She was just the night girl. The one who cleaned up messes and emptied trash cans and made sure the floors were shiny for the day shift. For the first few weeks, she barely spoke to the residents. She'd help Mrs. Chin back to her room when she got confused looking for the cafeteria. She'd bring Mr. Rodriguez a glass of water when he couldn't sleep. She'd listen to Miss Dorothy tell the same story about her wedding day 3 times in one shift, never mentioning she'd heard it before. But slowly, something started happening. The residents stopped being just old people who needed help. They became real. Complicated. Full of stories that mattered. Mrs. Chin had been a piano teacher who'd taught over 300 students. Mr. Rodriguez had worked construction for 40 years and built half the buildings downtown. Miss Dorothy had been a nurse in World War II, had held dying soldiers and written letters to their mothers. These were people. Real people with real lives who'd loved and lost and built things and mattered. And now they were here, in this building that smelled like disinfectant and boiled vegetables, being forgotten by a world that had stopped caring. They reminded Corinne of her grandparents. Her mother's parents, who'd passed before the divorce. They'd been kind. Present. The only people who'd made Corinne feel like she mattered just by existing. If you've ever felt invisible, comment below. And if this story is hitting home, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. You won't believe where this goes. 6 months into the job, Corinne met Mr. Patterson. He was new to Meadowbrook, a recent arrival from a different facility that had closed down. 73 years old, former high school teacher, widowed 3 years earlier. He had kind eyes and a dry sense of humor that reminded Corinne of her grandfather. "You're too young to be working nights," he'd said the first time she helped him find his glasses. "Kids your age should be out living." "I'm not really a kid anymore," Corinne had replied. "I'm 24. 24 is a baby." He'd smiled. "What are you running from?" The question had caught her off guard. Most people didn't ask. Most people didn't care. Nothing, she'd lied. "Everyone who works night shift is running from something," Mr. Patterson had said. "Me? I'm running from an empty house that's too quiet." "What about you?" Corinne had almost told him. Almost let the whole story spill out about Trevor and her family and feeling like she'd disappeared. But she'd swallowed it back down, smiled, and changed the subject. Over the next months, Mr. Patterson became something close to a friend. He'd stay up late reading in the common room, and Corinne would take her breaks there, talking with him about books and news and nothing important. He told her about his daughter, Lila, who was finishing graduate school. About his wife, who'd died of cancer and left a hole he didn't know how to fill. Corinne told him bits and pieces of her own story. Not everything. Not about Trevor or her family's disappointment. But enough that he seemed to understand why she was there, mopping floors at 3 a.m. instead of living the life a 24-year-old should live. "You're smarter than this job," he'd said one night. "You know that, right?" "Smart doesn't matter if you're broken," Corinne had replied. "Broken things can be fixed." He looked at her over his reading glasses. Sometimes they come back stronger than they were before. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Corinne was cleaning the administrative office, emptying trash cans, when she noticed something odd. A stack of papers in the recycling bin, half shredded but still readable. Financial reports. Budget cuts. Plans to reduce staffing and services. She pulled them out, curious. started reading, and felt her blood go cold. The care home was being sold. Corporate ownership had been skimming money for months, cutting corners on food and medication and maintenance. They were planning to close Meadowbrook entirely, sell the property to developers, and scatter the residents to other facilities. Most of the residents couldn't afford to move. Their pensions barely covered Meadowbrook's rates. The cheaper facilities had waiting lists months long. And some of them, like Mr. Patterson, would lose everything. Their rooms. Their community. The last stable thing in their lives. Corinne sat in that office at 4 a.m, holding those shredded papers, and felt something wake up inside her. Something angry and fierce that she'd thought Trevor had killed. These people mattered. They deserved better. And nobody else was fighting for them. But what could she do? She was nobody. Just a night shift worker with a community college dropout on her record and $12,000 of stupidity to her name. She thought about her business classes. The ones she'd barely finished before leaving school. She thought about her grandparents, who'd been kind to everyone and died in a facility not much better than this one. She thought about Mr. Patterson, who'd told her broken things could be fixed. And she thought, maybe I can't save myself, but maybe I can save them. The next morning, instead of going home to sleep, Corinne went to the public library. She sat at a computer terminal with a cup of bad coffee and started researching. Elder law, nursing home regulations, corporate fraud, pension protection. She read until her eyes burned and her head ached, and the librarian told her they were closing. Then she went back the next day, and the next, and the next. For 3 months, Corinne worked her night shifts, slept 4 hours a day, and spent every other waking moment teaching herself how to fight a corporation that had lawyers and money and power. She printed out regulations, made spreadsheets of financial discrepancies, found patterns in the budget cuts that proved intentional fraud. She called state agencies and got transferred 20 times. She called local reporters and got voicemails that were never returned. She called lawyers and got told she didn't have a case, didn't have evidence, didn't have a chance. But she kept going, because Mr. Patterson was counting on her, even though he didn't know it yet. Because Mrs. Chin and Mr. Rodriguez and Miss Dorothy and all the others deserve someone to fight for them. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the thing that would prove she wasn't worthless after all. At Thanksgiving that year, she went to her mother's house for dinner. Marcus was there with his girlfriend at the time, her aunt and cousins. Everyone asking each other about jobs and vacations and accomplishments. Corinne's working in healthcare, her mother said when someone asked. Her voice was tight, smile forced. At a care facility. Oh, that's nice, her aunt had replied, clearly not interested. Marcus, tell us about your promotion. And, just like that, the conversation moved on. Corinne sat there eating mashed potatoes, invisible again, and realized it didn't hurt as much anymore. She had something they didn't. Purpose. A fight worth fighting. A reason to wake up every day that had nothing to do with approval or validation or proving she mattered. She mattered to Mr. Patterson. To Mrs. Chin. To every person at Meadowbrook who'd been told they were disposable. That was enough. 2 weeks later, she found Nathan Cross. A lawyer who'd lost his own mother to nursing home neglect. Who answered her 20th cold email with 3 words, let's talk. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Corinne brought her research, her evidence, her 3 months of work in a battered folder. She spread it across the table and waited for him to tell her she was wasting his time. Instead, he read every page, looked up at her with something like respect, and said, you built a case. A real one. How old are you? 25. And you did this alone? I had to. Nobody else would. Nathan Cross smiled. I'll take your case. Pro bono. But you need to understand something. We're going up against a corporation with deep pockets and expensive lawyers. They're going to try to bury us. They're going to try to discredit you. And even if we win, it won't be easy. Corinne looked him in the eye. I've got nothing left to lose. Then let's make them wish they'd never heard your name. The first threat came on a Tuesday. Corinne was at home, trying to sleep after her shift, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Corinne Hale. The voice was male, professional, cold. Yes, you need to drop the case against Meadowbrook's ownership. This isn't a request. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Who is this? Someone who's trying to help you avoid making a terrible mistake. Walk away now and nothing happens. Keep pushing and you'll regret it. The line went dead. Corinne sat on her bed, phone still pressed to her ear, hands shaking. She'd known this might happen. Nathan had warned her. But knowing something and experiencing it were different things entirely. She called Nathan. They threatened me. Good, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. That means they're scared. They wouldn't threaten you if they thought you were harmless. I don't feel dangerous. I feel terrified. Terrified people can be the most dangerous of all. They've got nothing left to lose. He paused. Court date is next week. Are you still in? Corinne thought about Mr. Patterson. About the shredded documents. About every time her family had made her feel small and worthless. About Trevor taking her money and her trust like they meant nothing. I'm in. Then let's go to war. The week before the hearing was the longest of Corinne's life. She kept working her shifts at Meadowbrook, but now she was watching her back, jumping at shadows. The corporate lawyers had started showing up, walking through the facility with clipboards, taking photos, talking to residents who didn't understand what was happening. Mrs. Chun grabbed Corinne's hand one night. Are they going to make us leave? Not if I can help it, Corinne promised. You're just a cleaning girl, Mrs. Chun said, but her voice was gentle. What can you do? More than they think. She didn't tell the residents about the case. Didn't want to get their hopes up in case she failed. But Mr. Patterson figured it out. He cornered her in the hallway 3 days before the hearing. I heard you talking to Nathan Cross, he said. The lawyer. You're fighting for us, aren't you? Corinne wanted to deny it. To protect herself in case everything fell apart. But she looked at his face and couldn't lie. Someone has to. Why you? Because nobody else will. Because you all deserve better. Because I'm tired of watching people get thrown away like they don't matter. Mr. Patterson's eyes got bright. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for trying. That night, Corinne couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. The corporate lawyers would tear her apart. Point out that she never finished her degree. That she was just a janitor with delusions of competence. That she had no standing, no credentials, no right to speak for anyone. And they'd be right, wouldn't they? She was nobody. Just a girl who dropped out of community college and got scammed by a boyfriend she'd been dumb enough to trust. What made her think she could stand up in court and win? But then she thought about her grandparents. About how they'd ended their lives in a place that barely cared about them. About how she'd been helpless then, too young to understand or fight back. About how she'd promised herself she'd never be helpless again. This wasn't about winning. It was about trying. About standing up and saying these people mattered, even if everyone else had stopped listening. The morning of the hearing, Corinne put on the only professional outfit she owned. A thrift store blazer that didn't quite fit and pants she'd bought for her community college presentations. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Nathan met her at the courthouse. Ready? No. Perfect. Neither are they. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. Wood paneling and fluorescent lights and a judge who looked tired before anything even started. The corporate lawyers sat on one side in their expensive suits. 3 of them. Probably cost more per hour than Corinne made in a month. She and Nathan sat on the other side. Just the 2 of them. The judge called the case. Nathan presented their evidence. The financial discrepancies. The cut services. The plans to close Meadowbrook and scatter the residents. The corporate lawyers objected to everything, argued every point, tried to get evidence thrown out on technicalities. Then it was Corinne's turn to testify. She stood up, walked to the witness stand, and felt every eye in the room on her. The judge. The lawyers. The court reporter. Nathan giving her an encouraging nod. The corporate lawyer who questioned her was a woman in her 50s with perfect hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. Miss Hale, is it true you never completed your college degree? Yes. And you work as a night shift custodian? Yes. No formal training in law or finance? No formal training. So, what makes you think you're qualified to bring a case like this? To accuse a respected corporation of fraud. Corinne took a breath. This was the moment. This was where they'd try to make her small again. Because I see them, she said quietly. The residents. I see them every night when everyone else has gone home. I see Mrs. Chin when she's confused and scared. I see Mr. Rodriguez when his arthritis is so bad he can't sleep. I see Miss Dorothy when she forgets where she is and thinks she's back at the hospital during the war. The lawyer tried to interrupt, but Corinne kept going. You asked what qualifies me? I qualify because I care. Because when your client started cutting corners on medication and food and heating, I noticed. Because when they started planning to close Meadowbrook and throw out residents who have nowhere else to go, I decided to do something about it. Miss Hale, I may not have a law degree or a business degree or any of the credentials you think matter. But I have 3 months of evidence that proves your client has been stealing from vulnerable people. And I have enough common sense to know that's wrong. The courtroom was quiet. Is common sense a legal qualification now? The lawyer asked, trying to recover. It should be, Corinne said. Because anybody with common sense can see what your client is doing. They're betting on nobody caring enough to stop them. They're betting on these residents being invisible. She looked at the judge. They made a bad bet. The corporate lawyer asked more questions. Tried to poke holes in her research. Tried to make her seem incompetent or biased or too emotional to be credible. But Corinne had spent 3 months preparing for this. She had answers. She had facts. She had proof. When the lawyer finally sat down, looking frustrated, Nathan stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to call several residents of Meadowbrook to testify. Over the next 2 hours, Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Chin, Mr. Rodriguez, and 3 others took the stand. They talked about the heat being turned down in winter, about medications being delayed or denied, about food portions shrinking, about being told the facility might close with less than 30 days' notice. Mr. Patterson's testimony hit the hardest. I'm 73 years old, he said. I taught high school English for 40 years. I raised a daughter on a teacher's salary. I saved what I could. When my wife got cancer, the medical bills took most of our savings. This place, Meadowbrook, it's all I can afford. If they close it, I have nowhere to go. My pension can't cover the nicer facilities. The cheaper ones have waiting lists 2 years long. His voice broke. I thought I'd done everything right. I worked hard. I saved. I paid my taxes. And now I'm being told I'm disposable. That my home can be taken away because some corporation needs to make a profit. He looked at Corinne. But this young woman, she saw us. When everyone else looked through us, she saw us. She fought for us. And whatever happens here today, I want you to know that mattered. Somebody cared enough to try. The judge called for a recess. Corinne went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her hands were still shaking. Nathan found her in the hallway. You did good in there. It doesn't feel like enough. It's more than anyone else did. They went back into the courtroom. The judge returned. Everyone stood. And then the judge started talking. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. The financial documents. The testimony. The patterns of care described by the residents. He looked at the corporate lawyers. What I see is a disturbing portrait of a company that prioritized profit over the well-being of vulnerable people under their care. Corinne's heart was beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiffs. The sale of Meadowbrook Care Home is hereby blocked. The corporation in question will be investigated for fraud and elder abuse. The residents' pensions and housing are protected. The gavel came down. Corinne didn't move. Couldn't process what she'd just heard. Nathan was grinning, shaking her shoulder. Mr. Patterson was crying in the gallery. Mrs. Chin was hugging Mr. Rodriguez. They'd won. She'd won. That night, local news crews showed up at Meadowbrook. They wanted interviews. Wanted to talk to the young woman who'd taken on a corporation and won. Corinne declined. Went home. Sat on her bed. And cried for the first time since Trevor had left. But these weren't the same tears. These weren't tears of being broken. These were tears of finally being whole enough to fight back. The next day, Corinne went to work like nothing had happened. Pushed her mop. Emptied trash cans. helped residents find their way back to their rooms. But Mr. Patterson pulled her aside. "You changed our lives," he said. "You know that, right? I just did what anyone would do." "No. Most people walk past problems. You walked into them." And then he said something that made Corinne's chest tight. "My daughter, Lila, she's getting married soon. I'd like you to meet her. To tell her about what you did. So she knows there are still people in the world who fight for what's right." Corinne smiled. "I'd like that." She didn't know then that Lila was her brother's fiancée. Didn't know that their worlds were about to collide in the worst and best way possible. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she felt like she mattered. 3 weeks later, a reporter named Keisha James from the Dayton Daily called. She'd heard about the case. Wanted to do a feature story. Corinne almost said no, but Nathan convinced her. "People need to know this kind of thing can be done," he said. "That one person can make a difference." The article ran on the front page of the local section. Night shift hero saves nursing home. It detailed everything. The fraud. The evidence. The court case. Corinne's role in all of it. It mentioned that she'd started a nonprofit called Dignity Advocates to help other facilities facing similar situations. That nonprofit was mostly just Corinne and a donated laptop, but it sounded impressive in print. The article spread. Other facilities reached out. Other residents who'd been told they had no options. Other families desperate for help. Over the next 3 years, Corinne worked with Nathan and a growing network of volunteers to fight 14 more cases. They won 12 of them. Saved over 300 people from losing their homes. And through it all, her family had no idea. Because they'd stopped asking about her life years ago. They knew she worked in healthcare, and that was enough for them. They didn't ask for details. Didn't want them. Corinne was the disappointment, the dropout, the one who'd never lived up to expectations. Let them think that, Corinne decided. She didn't need their approval anymore. She had something better. She had purpose. She had people who actually saw her and valued her and knew her name meant something. But secrets have a way of coming out. And family has a way of showing up exactly when you don't want them to. 3 years after the Meadowbrook case, Corinne got an invitation in the mail. Heavy cardstock. Elegant script. Her brother Marcus was getting married. The engagement party would be held at a banquet hall outside Dayton. Family and close friends only. Corinne almost didn't go. She hadn't been to a family event in over a year. But something made her RSVP yes. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a desire to see if anything had changed. Maybe just habit. She showed up in her best dress, which wasn't saying much. Took a seat at the end of the table. Watched her family laugh and toast and celebrate Marcus's happiness. Waited for someone to acknowledge her. Nobody did. Until Lila leaned forward, stared at her with confused recognition, and asked, "You're the one." And everything Corinne had kept hidden came crashing into the open. The silence after Lila's question felt like falling. Corinne stood in that parking lot, her father in front of her, the sounds of family chaos muted behind the closed banquet hall door. The string lights swayed. The October air smelled like rain. And her father looked at her like she was someone he'd never met. "You saved hundreds of people," he said slowly, like he was testing the words. "You built a nonprofit. You went to court and won against a corporation." "Yes. And you never told us. You never asked." He flinched. Actually flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair, Corinne. We're your family. Are you?" The question came out sharper than she'd meant it, but she didn't take it back. "When's the last time you called me? When's the last time you came to where I worked or asked what I was doing with my life? You said you were working at a nursing home. We thought. You thought I was nothing. Be honest. You thought I'd failed and you were embarrassed." Her father opened his mouth, closed it. The truth sat between them like broken glass. Behind them, the door opened again. Marcus stepped out, his face pale in the artificial light. "Corinne, wait. Please." She turned to look at her brother. The golden child. The successful one. The one who'd always had their parents' attention and approval while she'd fought for scraps. "I didn't know," Marcus said. His voice was rough. "About any of it. The Meadowbrook case. The nonprofit. Lila's father. I swear I had no idea." "Of course you didn't." Nobody did. Nobody cared enough to ask. That's not he stopped, because even he couldn't finish that lie. More people were coming out now. Her mother, tears streaking her makeup. Her aunt. Her cousins. Lila and her father, Mr. Patterson, who looked between Corinne and her family with growing understanding. "Oh," Mr. Patterson said softly. "You're that Corinne." The one he stopped, realization hitting hard. "The one they what?" Lila asked. "The one they never mentioned," Mr. Patterson finished. "When I talked about you, they never said anything. Never made the connection. I thought." He looked at Corinne's mother. "I thought you were proud of her. I thought everyone knew." Corinne's mother made a small, broken sound. The parking lot had become a stage, and everyone was an audience to family shame laid bare. Corinne wanted to leave. To get in her car and drive away and let them all drown in their guilt and discomfort. But she'd spent too many years running from confrontation. "Someone explain," Lila said. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "How does this happen? How does your daughter save my father's life, save hundreds of people, make the news, build an entire nonprofit, and you don't know?" "We knew she worked at the home," Corinne's mother said weakly. "We just didn't realize." "You didn't ask," Lila interrupted. "That's different from not realizing. Not asking means you didn't care enough to try." Marcus stepped forward. "That's not fair. You don't know our family." "I know Dad talks about Corinne like she's a miracle," Lila shot back. "Like she's the reason he's still alive. And I know that until tonight, none of you had any idea. So either your family communication is criminally bad, or you chose not to see her. Which is it?" Nobody answered. Corinne felt a strange sense of displacement, like she was watching this happen to someone else. Her family being called out by an outsider. Her mother crying. Her father speechless. Marcus looking lost. And Mr. Patterson, standing there with his arm around his daughter, looking at Corinne like she hung the moon. "She came to court in a thrift store suit," Mr. Patterson said quietly. "Faced down 3 corporate lawyers who tried to make her look incompetent. And she destroyed them. Not with anger. Not with volume. With facts and heart, and the kind of courage most people never find." He looked at Corinne's family. "That's your daughter. Your sister. And you didn't know." The accusation hung in the air. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most, comment below. You're not alone. Subscribe because this story isn't over yet. Corinne's aunt tried to salvage something. We all had difficult years. The divorce was hard on everyone. Things got complicated. Complicated? Corinne heard herself say. Marcus got college paid for. Got a car. Got family dinners where everyone celebrated his accomplishments. I got a seat at the end of the table and silence. She looked at her mother. "You told people I worked maintenance. You were ashamed of me." "I was worried about you," her mother said, voice breaking. "You dropped out of school. You wouldn't talk to us. You just disappeared into that place. Because I'd already disappeared to you." Karen's voice cracked. "Trevor took my savings and my trust and left me with nothing. And I couldn't tell you because I knew exactly what you'd say. That I was stupid. That I'd proven I couldn't handle my own life. That I was the disappointment you'd always suspected I was." Her mother gasped. "I never said. You didn't have to. I could see it every time you looked at me." Corinne's hands were shaking. "Every time you changed the subject when someone asked about me. Every time you made excuses for why I wasn't at family photos. Every time you chose Marcus's work dinner over my academic ceremony." The words were pouring out now, years of them, stored up like floodwater behind a dam. And once started, Corinne couldn't stop them. "I became invisible because being invisible hurt less than being seen as a failure. And you know what? It was better that way. Because when I found something that mattered, when I found people who needed me and work that meant something, I didn't have to worry about disappointing you. You'd already written me off." Her brother stepped closer. "Corinne, I'm sorry. I should have called more. Should have visited. Should have been a better brother. You should have been any kind of brother at all." Marcus flinched like she'd hit him. But Corinne wasn't being cruel. She was being honest. And honesty after years of silence felt like pulling splinters from old wounds. Her father found his voice. "What do you want from us? An apology?" We're giving you that. We're sorry. We should have been better. I don't want your apology, Corinne said. I wanted you to see me, to care enough to ask, to treat me like I mattered. She paused. But I don't need that anymore. I found people who see me without needing an engagement party revelation. Lila was watching her with something like awe. You're amazing, she said softly. No wonder Dad talks about you constantly. Your dad saw me when I was mopping floors at 3 in the morning, Corinne said. He saw me when I was nobody. That matters more than all of this. She gestured at her family, standing in their expensive clothes, drowning in guilt and belated recognition. I should go, Corinne said. Please don't, Mr. Patterson said. This is Marcus and Lila's engagement party. They should celebrate. And frankly, you're the only person here I actually want to talk to. Lila laughed, slightly hysterical. Same. Marcus looked between his fiancée, his future father-in-law, and his sister. This is insane. This whole night is insane. Welcome to what insane feels like, Corinne said. I've been living it for years. Her mother stepped forward, mascara streaking her cheeks. Baby, please. Let me make this right. How? Corinne asked. What does making it right look like, Mom? Do you even know? Her mother opened her mouth and nothing came out. Because what could she say? Sorry didn't rebuild years of neglect. Sorry didn't erase every time she'd chosen appearances over her daughter's actual life. Sorry was a word, and words without change meant nothing. The door to the banquet hall opened again. More relatives peering out, curious about the drama. Corinne could see her cousins, the ones who'd excluded her from group photos. Her uncle, who'd never remembered her name right. All of them suddenly interested now that she was someone worth noticing. I'm going home, Corinne said. You all can stay. Celebrate. Pretend this didn't happen. That's not fair, her aunt said. You can't just drop this bomb and leave. Corinne laughed, and it sounded wrong even to her own ears. I didn't drop the bomb. I've been living my life. You're just finally seeing it. She walked toward her car, fishing keys from her purse. Behind her, she could hear her mother crying. Marcus calling her name. Voices overlapping in confused conversation. But Mr. Patterson's voice cut through. Let her go. She doesn't owe you anything right now. Corinne stopped, hand on her car door. Turned back. Thank you, she said to him. For seeing me. Thank you for saving me, he replied. For saving all of us. She got in her car. Drove away from that parking lot and all those shocked faces. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt completely, entirely free. She didn't need their validation. Didn't need their approval or recognition or belated pride. She'd built a life that mattered without them. She'd saved people who needed saving. She'd become someone her younger self would be proud of. And that was enough. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at Meadowbrook. Corinne was working a day shift, covering for someone who'd called in sick. She saw him walk through the lobby and her stomach dropped. We need to talk, he said. They went to the empty cafeteria. Sat across from each other at a table scarred with years of use. Marcus looked tired. Older than his 31 years. Lila's furious with me, he said. With all of us. She says if I don't make this right with you, she's not sure she wants to marry into this family. That's between you and her. Corinne, please. Help me understand. Why didn't you tell us? About Meadowbrook, about the nonprofit, about any of it. She looked at her brother. Really looked at him. Saw someone who genuinely seemed confused, like he couldn't understand how they'd gotten here. Because telling you would have meant you mattered to me more than the work did, Corinne said quietly. And you didn't. The residents here mattered more. The fight mattered more. Building something real mattered more than getting your approval. Marcus absorbed that like a punch. Were we really that bad? You weren't bad, Marcus. You were just absent. All of you. And after a while, I stopped waiting for you to show up. I'm showing up now. Are you? Corinne asked. Or are you here because Lila gave you an ultimatum? He was quiet for a long moment. Both. I'm here because I have to be, but also because I want to be. Because I looked at the newspaper articles about you. Read about the cases you've won. The lives you've changed. And I realized I don't know you at all. No, Corinne agreed. You don't. Can I? He asked. Can I get to know you? Not the sister I remember from before the divorce, but who you are now. Corinne felt something complicated move through her chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something that could become forgiveness, given time and effort and proof of change. Maybe, she said. But it's not going to be easy. You don't get to just show up now that I'm someone impressive and pretend the last decade didn't happen. I know. Marcus leaned forward. Teach me. Tell me about your work. About what you do here. About who you've become. I want to know. And for the first time since the engagement party, Corinne felt something crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Not break. Just crack. Just enough to let a little light through. Okay, she said. But I'm not performing for you. I'm not going to make this easy or comfortable. You want to know me? Then you have to actually see me. The real me. Not the version that makes you feel better about being a terrible brother. Fair enough. They talked for an hour. Corinne told him about Trevor, about dropping out of school, about the night she found those shredded documents. She told him about Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Chin and all the residents who'd become more family than her actual family. She told him about the court cases and the late nights and the moments she'd wanted to give up. And Marcus listened. Really listened. Asked questions. Didn't interrupt or make excuses or try to minimize anything. When Corinne finished, Marcus was quiet for a while. Then he said, I'm proud of you. I know that probably doesn't mean much right now, but I am. You're the best person in our family, and we treated you like you were nothing. Yeah, Corinne said. You did. Give me a chance to be better. Please. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Corinne thought about all the years of silence. All the family events where she'd been invisible. All the times she'd needed support and gotten nothing. She thought about how easy it would be to say no, to keep him locked out the way he'd locked her out. But she also thought about second chances. About how she'd been given one by Nathan Cross, who'd believed in her when she was nobody. About how Mr. Patterson had seen something in her worth nurturing. Maybe she could do the same. Maybe. One chance, she said. You blow it, we're done. Understand. Understood. They stood up. Marcus moved like he wanted to hug her, then thought better of it. Held out his hand instead. Corinne shook it. Lila wants to have you both over for dinner, Marcus said. Her and her dad. If you're willing. Corinne almost said no. Almost protected herself from the possibility of more disappointment. But Mr. Patterson would be there. And Lila seemed genuine. And maybe it was time to stop running from everything. Tell me when. Marcus smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him in years. Thank you. After he left, Corinne went back to work. Mrs. Chin found her in the hallway. Was that your brother? Yes. He looks like you. Around the eyes. Yeah. Family's complicated, Mrs. Chin said. But sometimes they come around. Sometimes people learn. Sometimes, Corinne agreed. That night, lying in bed, Corinne thought about the engagement party. About her family's shocked faces. About Lila asking, you're the one. About standing in that parking lot, finally being seen. It should have felt like victory. Like vindication. Like proof that she'd won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing at a crossroads, looking at paths that all led different places. She could forgive her family and let them back in. She could cut them off completely and build her life without them. She could maintain careful distance, keeping them at arm's length forever. She didn't know which path was right. Maybe there wasn't a right path. Maybe there was just the path she chose and the consequences that came with it. One thing she knew for certain, she wasn't the same person she'd been at 22, crying over Trevor's betrayal. She wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. She'd built something real. Saved people who needed saving. Become someone who mattered. And whether her family acknowledged it or not, that was true. That was hers. That couldn't be taken away. The engagement party had revealed who she was to them. But she'd known who she was long before that night. And that was the difference. That was everything. 3 months after the engagement party, Corinne sat in Lila and Marcus's apartment, eating homemade pasta and listening to her brother tell a story about a disastrous client presentation. Mr. Patterson laughed from his seat at the head of the table, and Lila refilled wine glasses, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. Because normal was something Corinne had to relearn. Normal meant family dinners where she was actually included. Normal meant her brother calling twice a week to check in. Normal meant her mother sending awkward text messages, trying to rebuild what she'd let crumble. Normal was exhausting. "You're quiet tonight," Lila said, catching Corinne's eye. "Just thinking. About? About how strange this is. Being here. Being seen." Mr. Patterson reached over and squeezed her hand. "You were always worth seeing. Some people just took longer to look." The words settled over the table. Marcus stared at his plate. Lila watched her father with obvious love. And Corinne felt that complicated knot in her chest loosen just slightly. This wasn't forgiveness. Not complete forgiveness. But it was something. A start. A crack in the wall that might, eventually, become a door. "Dad told me something last week," Lila said, steering the conversation. "About a new facility that reached out to dignity advocates." "In Columbus?" Corinne nodded. Sunrise Gardens. Similar situation to Meadowbrook. Corporate ownership cutting services, planning to close and sell. About 90 residents, most of them on fixed incomes. "Are you taking the case?" "Already started. Nathan's reviewing their documents now." Marcus looked up. "How do you do it? How do you keep fighting these battles?" "Because someone has to." Corinne shrugged. "Because these people worked their whole lives. They deserve to end those lives with dignity, not being shuffled around like inconvenient furniture." "But it's so much work. And you're still working at Meadowbrook, running the nonprofit, dealing with all of us." He gestured around the table. "Doesn't it get exhausting?" "Yes," Corinne said honestly. "But the alternative is worse. The alternative is looking away. Pretending it's not my problem. And I've been invisible. I know what it feels like to be dismissed. I won't do that to them." Mr. Patterson smiled. "That's my girl." The words hit Corinne harder than she'd expected. My girl. Like she belonged to him more than her own family. Like he'd claimed her when they couldn't be bothered to. If this story is making you feel something, subscribe so you never miss an ending like this. Drop a comment if you've ever found family in unexpected places. After dinner, Marcus asked if he could drive Corinne home. She almost said no, almost took her own car to maintain that safe distance. But she agreed. They drove through Dayton in silence for a while. Streetlights painting shadows across Marcus's face. The radio playing something quiet and forgettable. "Mom wants to see you," Marcus finally said. "She's asked me 3 times to invite you to Sunday dinner." "I know. She's texted me too. Are you going to go?" Corinne watched the city slide past her window. "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's too late." "It's not too late," Marcus said quickly. "She's trying. She's really trying." "For how long? Until the guilt wears off? Until she gets tired of trying and goes back to being ashamed of me." "That's not fair." "Maybe not. But it's honest." Marcus was quiet for a block. Then 2. Then he pulled over into an empty parking lot and turned off the engine. "What are you doing?" Corinne asked. "I need to say something and I need you to actually hear it." He turned to face her. "We failed you. Not just Mom and Dad. Me too. I was your big brother and I should have been there. I should have noticed when you were struggling. I should have called more, visited more, cared more." "Marcus, let me finish." His voice was raw. "I got so wrapped up in my own life, my own success, that I forgot about you. And that's on me. Not on the divorce or the family drama or anything else. That's my failure." Corinne felt tears prick her eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it. Because I've been making excuses for 3 months, trying to justify why I was such a terrible brother. But there's no justification. I just was. And I'm sorry." The apology hung between them in the dark car. Real. Heavy. The first truly honest thing her brother had said to her in years. "I don't know if sorry is enough," Corinne said quietly. "I know. But it's all I've got right now. That and a promise to do better. To actually show up. To be the brother you deserved all along. Promises are easy. Following through is hard. Then watch me follow through." Marcus leaned back against his seat. "I've been reading everything I can find about your cases. About elder law and nursing home advocacy. I want to understand what you do. Who you are. Why. Because Lila was right. You're amazing. And I missed it. I missed watching you become this incredible person who fights for people nobody else will fight for. I missed all of it because I was too busy looking at my own reflection. Corinne wiped at her eyes. This doesn't fix everything. I know. You hurt me. All of you. For years. I know. And I'm not going to just forget that because you're suddenly interested now that I'm impressive. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to earn back what I lost. Your trust. Your respect. Maybe, eventually, your forgiveness. Corinne looked at her brother. Really looked at him. Saw the guilt and shame and genuine desire to make things right. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something. One step at a time, she said. I'll come to Sunday dinner. But if Mom makes this about showing me off or trying to take credit for who I've become, I'm leaving. Deal. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was different now. Less hostile. More like the beginning of something that might, eventually, resemble a relationship. When Marcus dropped her off at her apartment, he said, I'm proud of you, Corinne. I should have said that years ago. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of who you are. Thanks, she said, because what else could she say? That Sunday, Corinne showed up at her mother's house. Her stomach was in knots. Her hands shook as she rang the doorbell. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But she stayed. Her mother answered the door with tears already in her eyes. You came. I said I would. I know, but I wasn't sure. She trailed off. Come in. Please. The house smelled like pot roast and guilt. Her mother had cooked all of Corinne's childhood favorites. Set the table with the good dishes. Put out fresh flowers. Tried too hard in that desperate way that made everything worse. Marcus and Lila were already there. Her father too, surprisingly. And his wife, Vanessa, who Corinne had barely spoken to in 10 years. This was an ambush. A family intervention disguised as Sunday dinner. Corinne almost left. Please stay, her mother said, reading her face. We just want to talk. All of us together. Corinne sat. Accepted a glass of wine. Waited. Her father spoke first. I know this is uncomfortable, but we need to say things that should have been said years ago. He looked at Corinne. I abandoned you. After the divorce, I was so focused on building a new life that I forgot about my old one. I forgot about you. And I'm sorry. Corinne said nothing. Her mother went next. I was bitter. Angry about the divorce. Angry at your father. And I took it out on you in ways that were unfair. I made you feel small because I felt small. I'm sorry. Still nothing. Marcus shifted. I already apologized, but I want to say it again in front of everyone. I was a selfish brother who cared more about my career than my family. I'm sorry. Vanessa, surprisingly, spoke. I'm sorry for not trying harder to include you. For letting your father build walls between his old family and his new one. You deserved better. They all looked at her. Waiting. Expecting her to say it was okay, to absolve them, to make this easier. But Corinne didn't make it easier. You're all sorry now, she said. Because you got caught. Because Lila called you out at the engagement party and you realized how bad it looked. But where were the apologies before? Where was the guilt when I was 22 and broken? When I was 25 and fighting alone? When I was 27 and saving lives nobody knew about? Her mother flinched. We didn't know. Because you didn't ask. Corinne's voice rose. You didn't ask because you didn't want to know. Because acknowledging me meant acknowledging your failures. It was easier to pretend I didn't exist. The room went silent. You're right, her father said quietly. You're absolutely right. I know I am. Corinne took a breath. And I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I need you. I'm here because I'm trying to figure out if I want you in my life. If you're worth the effort it's going to take to rebuild this. Are we? Her mother asked, voice breaking. Worth it. Corinne looked around the table. At faces filled with guilt and hope and fear. At people who'd hurt her deeply but who were, despite everything, still her family. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I'm willing to find out. On one condition. Anything, her mother said. No more hiding. No more pretending. If you want to know me, you have to actually see me. The real me. Not the version you want me to be. Not the daughter who makes you look good. Me. The person who works night shifts and fights corporations and doesn't have a college degree, but built something meaningful anyway. We want that, Marcus said. We want to know you. Then prove it. Not with words. With actions. Show up at Meadowbrook. Come to a court hearing. Meet the people I've helped. See my life instead of just hearing about it. Her father nodded. We can do that. And if you can't? Corinne looked at each of them. If this is too hard or too uncomfortable or too much work, then walk away now. Don't string me along. Don't make promises you won't keep. I've had enough of that for one lifetime. We're not walking away, her mother said firmly. Not again. Never again. Dinner was awkward. Conversations kept dying and restarting. Laughter felt forced. But somewhere between the pot roast and the apple pie, something shifted. They started asking real questions. About her work. About the residents. About what she needed. And Corinne started answering. Carefully. Testing whether this was real or just temporary guilt. By the time she left that night, she didn't have answers. Didn't know if her family would actually follow through. Didn't know if forgiveness was possible or even advisable. But she'd taken a step. And sometimes that's all you can do. Take one step and see where it leads. 6 months later, Corinne stood in a new courtroom. Another facility. Another corporation trying to displace vulnerable people. Another fight worth fighting. This time, her family was in the gallery. Marcus and Lila. Her mother. Even her father. They'd shown up. Not just this once, but for 3 hearings before this. Learning about her work. Meeting her residents. Actually seeing her. It still felt strange. Like wearing shoes that almost fit but not quite. But it was better than it had been. Better than nothing. The judge ruled in their favor. Another facility saved. Another 100 lives protected. Nathan shook her hand. The residents hugged her. And Corinne felt that familiar rush of purpose that made everything worth it. After, her mother approached carefully. Can I take you to dinner? Celebrate. Corinne almost said no. Almost retreated to her safe distance. But she thought about Mr. Patterson, about how he'd given her a chance when she was nobody. About second chances and whether people could really change. Okay, she said. But somewhere cheap. I don't need fancy. Her mother smiled. I know. I'm learning. And maybe that was the lesson in all of this. People could learn. Change was possible. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it could mean moving forward. That night, eating burgers at a diner, her mother asked about the Sunrise Gardens case. Actually asked. Actually listened. Actually cared. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward silences and careful words and years of hurt that couldn't be erased with a few dinners. But it was something. And sometimes something is enough. 3 years after the engagement party, Corinne stood in Meadowbrook's common room watching a new resident arrive. Her name was Penny. She was 68. She looked scared and alone, and like she'd been forgotten by everyone who should have remembered her. Corinne walked over and smiled. Welcome to Meadowbrook. I'm Corinne. Are you a nurse? Penny asked. No. I work here. And I want you to know something important. You're not invisible here. I see you. We all do. Penny's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You're welcome. Corinne helped Penny get settled. Introduced her to other residents. Made sure she knew where everything was and that she had people to talk to. Later, finishing her shift, she thought about how far she'd come. From the broken girl who'd lost everything to Trevor. From the invisible daughter at family gatherings. From the night shift worker nobody noticed. She'd become someone who fought for people. Someone who mattered. Someone who saw the invisible and made them visible again. Her family had come around. Slowly. Imperfectly. With setbacks and mistakes and moments where old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But they were trying. And Corinne was letting them try, which was its own kind of strength. Because the truth was this, being dismissed had been the greatest gift her family ever gave her. It had freed her from needing their approval. It had forced her to build her own purpose, her own worth, her own life. She'd become who she was meant to be not because of them, but despite them. And now, with them slowly becoming part of her life again, she didn't need to prove anything. She'd already proven everything that mattered. To herself, to the people she'd saved, to the residents who saw her when no one else did. Success isn't measured by the people who finally notice you. It's measured by the lives you touch when no one's watching. It's measured by the person you become in the darkness, when there's no applause, no recognition, no validation except your own. Corinne had become that person. And whether her family acknowledged it or not, whether they stayed in her life or drifted away again, that truth remained. She mattered. She'd always mattered. She just hadn't needed anyone else to tell her so. And that, more than any court victory or newspaper article or family reconciliation, was the real triumph. Walking to her car that night, Corinne looked up at the stars and smiled. Tomorrow, there would be another fight. Another resident who needed help. Another corporation that thought vulnerable people were disposable. Another chance to prove that one person with purpose could change the world. She was ready. She'd always been ready. She just hadn't known it until the moment everyone else stopped looking. Being invisible had taught her to see. Being dismissed had taught her to fight. Being forgotten had taught her who was worth remembering. And she'd remember them all. Every resident. Every victory. Every moment she chose purpose over approval. That was her legacy. Not the reconciliation with her family. Not the nonprofit with her name on it. But the lives she'd touched. The dignity she'd restored. The people she'd seen when everyone else looked away. That was everything. That was enough. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being underestimated isn't the end, it's often the beginning. Comment below with your own story of being invisible. I see you. We all do. And your story matters just as much as Corinne's. Never forget that.